Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where we have some surprise winners at the box office, unexpected loser, and then in which category does Joyride fall? Let's discuss. So the actual winner, number one, is the latest Insidious film, which is so nice for that movie and everyone who's involved, yet nobody really seems to care. They're like, that's nice for you. In fact, this number is actually shockingly big for how few people seem to care. Everyone just has laser focus right now, I think, on Barbenheimer. But anyway, this is the second best opening for the Insidious franchise, a decade after the last one, the last big opening came out. So 10 years later, that's incredible. And another strong debut for a horror film this year, where horror films have been doing quite well. Scream 6, Evil Dead Rise, and of course Megan, from the same producers as Insidious, Jason Blum and James Wan. And a lot of different studios and producers are getting in on this, though, because horror is really, horror has always done well. They're always cheap to make, and they always have the potential for big box office. That's why a lot of big filmmakers will get their start in horror. It's a great genre to break in with. But the genre has been doing particularly well as of late. So everyone's starting up horror divisions. For a while, it was like Jason Blum and Warner Brothers who were doing everything. And now, and they're still very much driving horror, but Paramount has become quite big. It's an exciting space. It's so big, even Disney's trying to get into it, thanks to their Fox label. They're like, we can use that for something, actually. All right, so once again, Latino audiences were a huge factor here. Now, Latino audiences have always supported horror, but fascinatingly, when the genre tries to make a film targeting them specifically, it doesn't do well. But Latino audiences love horror. However, as we've been discussing a lot lately, Latino audiences are flexing some serious box office muscle across the board. This also marks an impressive directorial debut for Patrick Wilson, longtime pal of James Wan, who of course directed many of the movies that Wilson has starred in, and is producing this one. And it's pretty swell of Wan to set Wilson up with a directing career, and once again emphasizes the importance of relationships in Hollywood. Now, on that note, speaking of relationships in Hollywood, Angel Studios doesn't really have any, but they sure have a lot of fans, enough to move the needle. The Chosen is their crown jewel, an ongoing crowd-funded series that over the past few years has played some episodes in theaters. We've talked about them because they've done quite well. In fact, The Chosen is so successful that just recently, the CW acquired the first 3 seasons, the rights to air them on that network in the United States, which is that was a huge deal for Angel Studios and that show. Now, how about The Sound of Freedom? Well, this movie was not produced by Angel Studios. Disney, after it acquired Fox, it decided to shelve this film, which I think is helping the narrative of Sound of Freedom, because a lot of people who are interested in Sound of Freedom are against Disney right now. So they're like, oh, why'd they shelve it, man? So we'll talk about this. So the director brought it to Angel Studios because he recognized there was a lot of crossover appeal in the film and the people who made the movie and people who enjoy the work of Angel Studios. And sure enough, Angel Studios passed the buck on to their biggest crowdfunders. They have some kind of think tank of the biggest contributors to their studio, which are viewers, because again, it's all crowdfunded. And they asked them, and they said, what do you guys think? Should we release this? And they were strongly encouraged by their crowdfunders to do so. But just because someone is a supporter of your company doesn't mean they understand good business moves. And I think it was a mistake for Angel Studios to release this film because Angel Studios was doing so well. So let me tell you why. So the film has been endorsed by Mel Gibson. Somebody inaccurately said it was his movie. He just backed it up. And the reason is because it stars his Jesus, Jim Caviezel, so that connection was there. And Jim Caviezel, for those of you who might not be aware, has come out in favor of several right-wing conspiracies. Let's say it that way. So many of you over the past couple of days have been like, why aren't you covering Sound of Freedom? Why isn't Sound of Freedom getting more coverage in the press overall? And, it's very conspiracy theory-like. It's not complicated. It's because of its relationship to right-wing conspiracies. That's the whole reason that it isn't getting any traction. Sound of Freedom is uncomfortably close to several right-wing conspiracies and the associated groups. And the movie has been politicized by the far right, not only with accusatory statements of, this isn't why it's getting coverage because it's some kind of conspiracy theory. Just people don't want to be anywhere near that. And then also religious groups and far-right organizations have been buying up a large number of the tickets, not just to give out for free, because they care about the film, they want to spread the message, et cetera, but clearly to also bump up that box office. So that's actually not a legitimate box. I mean, it is legitimate in that amount of money was made, but it didn't sell that number of tickets. It didn't entice that number of people to do it. It's so funny because the group that supports Sound of Freedom will accuse other studios of doing that, whereas they do not. They don't do that. But here, that was actually what was done. So that's not great. I mean, $40.2 million is an impressive amount of money. And that's since it's only number 3 this weekend, but it opened on July 4th, and it did very well, particularly on that opening day. So no matter where that money came from, the exhibitors are happy to take it. They don't care how many people are actually in the theater. They just care about the amount of money that was, the money that they get because of the tickets sold. And as you can see, that also has an effect on the box office. That number, because of the way it was handled, people did go see the movie, but I think that box office number is also, I would say that's a mix of ticket sales and also donations is a good way to put it. Now, we've discussed many times now, particularly in the last year or so, that conservative content is becoming quite popular, driven not just by white audiences, but also by a number of Latinos. We were just also talking about their box office muscle, and a lot of Latinos are conservative, as the United States is discovering through elections as well. So now you see it in elections, and now you're starting to see it in entertainment. And conservative and religious audiences also tend to be a bit older, as was the audience for Sound of Freedom. And that also is consistent with a lot of regular, will consistently go to the polls voters, which is why the left and left-leaning groups are trying to compel younger voters to get out there because it makes a difference. There are these divides, and you're starting to see it reflected in audiences, which is fascinating. Now, Yellowstone is the most successful conservative content to date because it has everything. Conservative support, Dutton, the family name on the show, has become a popular first name for babies, both boys and girls, over the past few years. But it also has Hollywood support, big name actors, big studios behind it. And that's partially because of, the success of the show. But when it first started, Taylor Sheridan already had an established career in Hollywood, which gave him legitimacy, which is probably how he got the big names and big companies to give him a look in the first place, and why they still feel comfortable with the show. No conspiracies anywhere near Yellowstone. It's more about values and culture and stuff like that. So big difference, huge difference. And so companies feel comfortable associating themselves with the Yellowstone brand. And Angel Studios is doing business with the CW. However, I wonder how the CW feels about their decision to release Sound of Freedom. I know that the studios and pretty much every major organization does not want to get, and you might be like, well, what about things on the far left? Well, there aren't as many, can't even think of any far left conspiracies, to be honest with you. And I'm sure some of you will have some down below. But, I think that's more of the situation here. So it's the conspiracy thing. And I wonder if releasing Sound of Freedom could potentially hurt Angel Studios going forward and the companies that are willing to do business with them. Just when they were on the verge of themselves of legitimacy. That deal with CW, I cannot overemphasize the importance and the historic nature of it. That means Angel Studios was, and maybe still is, on a path to getting into Hollywood, legitimizing themselves, coming very much from the outside. That is amazing. But money talks. Hollywood loves money more than anything else, just like any business does. How do you send a message? Through money. So Tyler Perry came from the outside, very much from the outside, but managed to build himself an empire. Dude just bought BET. That's how big he is. And I see no reason that a conservative and or religious filmmaker couldn't build a similar empire. And maybe that could have, or maybe still is, angel studios. But the right-wing conspiracies are going to make Hollywood very nervous. And in addition to making Hollywood nervous, a lot of the right-wing conspiracies vilify Hollywood itself. So of course they want nothing to do with those conspiracies and those who put them forward, because they're saying those horrible things about Hollywood directly. So how do you expect to do business with the very people that you're trying to tear down? So that's important. So nobody in Hollywood is going to give Sound of Freedom its flowers. And I think buying up tickets doesn't help the cause either. I mean, as I said, the exhibitors will thank you, but it becomes more of a political thing than an actual legitimate movie. We've seen plenty of religious and conservative content succeed without that type of tricks. They're not doing that for Yellowstone, and that's a phenomenon. Therefore, I continue to believe that we will see more and more conservative and religious content made from outside Hollywood and some coming from within. But Yellowstone is the model, not Sound of Freedom. So I think that's an important distinction to make. Also for you to understand the landscape. Now, also, it's very important politically. This is actually the most important politically. There is a big presidential election coming up, of course, as everyone knows, and far-right groups are formidable in size, the money that they have at their disposal, and aggressiveness. Here you have far-right groups basically gaming the box office to make a point, and they were able to do it successfully. Sound of Freedom is number 3. There it is in black and white, and that's the truth of it. It might have a bunch of asterisks next to it, but it got to number 3. Just like far-right groups have been able to successfully hurt Disney. All right, so on that note, let's talk about Dial of Destiny. The movie dropped less than 60% in its second weekend, so it's got that going for it. You know, sometimes we've seen some very big drops lately in second weekends. High 60s, sometimes in the 70th percentile. But this is less than 60, so is that really bad or what? Or is it okay because it's not a huge number? It's normal for a blockbuster, although, of course, Dial of Destiny started so low with its low opening weekend. Now, it's actually pacing ahead of the similarly dark, somewhat depressing No Time to Die. But the problem is that movie made 80% of its money overseas, which is not good. That's an unhealthy balance when it comes to the global box office. It should be more about 30-70. That's really that's the space that most movies live in. Similar situation with Mission Impossible Fallout, by the way, another comp that was used for Dial of Destiny opening weekend. So Indiana Jones is matching these films domestically, but neither one of them did particularly well domestically. They made all their money overseas, and Indiana Jones isn't doing well there. And it's already open everywhere that it's going to play. Now, as we discussed last weekend, Dial of Destiny's audience scores are okay. They're solid. But its big problem is that the franchise is likely too old. The Flash did even worse, and Indiana Jones and Michael Keaton's Batman are contemporaries, popular back in the late 1980s, 90s. And also, Dial of Destiny is just too expensive at $300 million before advertising. It would have to make $1 billion to turn a profit. Indiana Jones 5 is just bad business for a large number of reasons, and the buck stops with Kathleen Kennedy, which is why, with Bob Iger cleaning house already, it seems unlikely that Kathleen Kennedy will get yet another contract renewal. I mean, she's survived before, but especially, I think, with her successes so far in the rearview mirror at this point, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility because she has survived so many times, but I think this might finally be it. And as I've said, far-right groups have been able to damage the Disney brand. On the one hand, somewhat maliciously, some groups, but then I also think it's important to note that Disney, which used to pride itself on appealing to everyone, has started to lean left, and it's costing them their audience to the right, and people even who are mid-right. So Disney can still make money. They're still making a lot of money. They still lead the global box office this year, but they're not going to make as much money as they did before. And they have to either be okay with that or try and figure out how they can, how they can do this right. Now, I personally think, as I've stated before, that the problem with Disney's representation is that it's, for the most part, sloppy and forced. If they did it more organically and focused as much on the brands themselves as diversifying them, I think they focus so much on the diversification that they forget about holding the course with the brand and quality. And so they're like, oh, nobody liked this bad movie. Like, Disney's almost in some cases saying like, oh, you should support this movie just because of the diversification. And I think you can see with the success of Spider-Verse, which is very diverse, but, did very well, that there is a path forward. Its name is quality. All right. So, and, also still paying attention to the brand and more than just the diversification. That is, I think, the key. I think that that the projects would benefit and that they would be successful. And just like Spider-Verse, everyone goes, oh, wow, everyone loves Miles Morales. That's crucial. That's really, really important. Wait till we talk about Nimona a little bit later. Nimona did not do well. Speaking of representation, Movie Math flows so beautifully today from topic to topic. So from representation, now we head over to Joyride. It surely didn't deliver the opening that Sony was hoping for, thanks to the it had very strong reviews. They gave it a big splashy debut. I think they were hoping for more. It's no Bridesmaids. It's no Crazy Rich Asians. Both wedding themed, by the way. Maybe that was the missing ingredient. But it is on par with the wide debut, not when it opened in limited, but when it went wide, of Everything Everywhere All at Once. But now that was an awards film, though, which might have helped with its legs, that it kept going. Joyride is a raunchy comedy. There isn't a bigger picture to it. There isn't a longer play. Either you want to see it or you don't in theaters. But it's also a little bit like No Hard Feelings, which just came out, and perhaps the close proximity of these films' release hurt Joyride in particular because that was second up. Also, No Hard Feelings has a big star with Jennifer Lawrence, whereas Joyride has up-and-coming talent. Now, on that note, at least Joyride has a better public image than Birds of Prey did. People who see it, critics and fans, like it. So while the movie isn't a hit, I do think it makes for a great industry calling card, and it will help the careers of everyone involved in front of and behind the camera. As for the rest of the top 10, Elemental and Spider-Verse, talking about Spider-Verse, once again had amazing holds for another week. Yet one is a huge box office hit, Spider-Verse, and the other simply is not. But at least the Pixar flick got past the century mark domestic. Whew, and it should be able to pass Lightyear now, and maybe The Good Dinosaur, but not by much. It's still in the same ballpark. But DreamWorks, their latest animated movie, was not so lucky, but they still have plenty of strong franchises to rely on, including Trolls, which returns later this very year. They better get Shrek up and running, because this did not work. Over on streaming, starting with Nielsen for the first full week of June, look at Avatar, a superstar wherever it goes. But unfortunately, we can't tell how much of the viewership was on Disney Plus and how much was on Max. Why do we wonder? Did anybody watch it on Max? Well, I have some news for you. Speaking of Disney Plus versus Max, JustWatch.com, who? Well, they released a report that claims that Max has surpassed Disney Plus to gain third place when it comes to market share in the United States. What the what? Now, this report clearly doesn't have a lot of pull. I mean, I don't know how true it is, but I mean, a lot of people, I think, are second-guessing it because it didn't really do anything for Warner Brothers Discovery's stock. However, it could be an indicator of news to come. Suddenly, down the line, a report will come that has legitimacy, and it could really shake things up. Because it seems that Max, what do you know, might actually have found the right balance of prestige content from HBO and everything they brought over from HBO Max, but also now mass appeal thanks to all that Discovery content. What? That would be an amazing twist. Apple TV, as you can see, is last on this chart. However, Ted Lasso remains a bright spot for the streamer, still charting in the overall, even 1 week after it wrapped its third season. Still no word as to whether or not that show is done. I still think it's probably going to get a season 4. Not too much going on with streaming otherwise. Arnold continues to bring viewers over to Netflix, as you can see on the originals chart. And then on the movies chart, no other one was able to come even close to Avatar: The Way of the Water. The other numbers are so low, it's ridiculous. Like, wow. Then over on Netflix, for just last week, Extraction 2 is still number 1 for the third week in a row. But new LGBT animated movie Nimona had a very weak debut. Let's see if it can gain some traction in the next week or so. Sometimes we see that happen because, these debut late in the week. Content, drops on a Friday. This is for the full week. Maybe we'll see it go up next week. But I saw Nimona. I didn't get a chance to review it, but I will say that I think Nimona has excellent representation and is quite well done. It's a very engaging and fun movie. However, when you put your business hat on, it didn't make an effort to have broader appeal whatsoever. Now, of course, it doesn't have to, but this is the result. Extremely low viewership. Not even moderate viewership. Low viewership. Like, I know some of you who watched it really enjoyed it and want a sequel. I'd want a sequel, actually. But these are not the numbers of a movie that gets a sequel. With shows, The Witcher might not be what it once was. That was once a phenomenon, but so much damage has been inflicted, from fans not liking season 2 to all the problems with Henry Cavill. He outright has left for the season after this. But it still managed to debut in first place, so it's not totally dead for Netflix. Black Mirror season 6 is soft number 2 in its third week. This one's been up and down. Started in second place, went up to number 1 last week. Now it's back in 2. And look at Titans season 4. It hit Netflix in several countries, not including the United States, but it did enough to get ninth place. Now that's of course a Max show. And by the way, a handful of HBO shows, Warner Brothers Discovery has licensed them to Netflix, including in the United States. And you'll be seeing them show up there over the next couple of weeks and months. And Insecure was already just added. So I'll be curious, with Titans number 9, let's see if Insecure shows up next week on the charts. Let's see if this actually moves the needle for some HBO shows that haven't maybe gotten the attention that they would on a service like Netflix, which casts a wider net. All right, so it would maybe be, so Zazzy's going to be like, will Zazzy laugh last? He's just got to survive long enough, and maybe he will. Then on iTunes, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 hit digital on Friday, and sure enough, is number 1. The Blackening also has gone to digital about just 3 weeks after it hit theaters, and is also doing pretty well. And fans are getting ready for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning on Wednesday. It's playing in some countries already, with the 6-movie collection breaking into the top 10. As for this coming week, that's right, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning hits on Wednesday, and it's going to need all the extra days it can get, because it ain't looking good for the premium screens. At first, Tom Cruise thought he could pry some premium screens away from Barbenheimer, which of course is the very next weekend. Now, Universal has locked down IMAX for Oppenheimer, at least for the first week. The deal is actually for 3 weeks, but Tom Cruise is hoping if the sales are only medium, he can convince them to give him a couple IMAX screens back. So for 1 week, no IMAX screens, no way. But after that, maybe. And then Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning felt it had Dolby at least as a safety net, with Barbie only able to get 4 p.m. showtimes for opening weekend for Dolby. But then on Saturday, Dolby released all showtimes for Barbie, except now it's the reverse. Like the noon showtime is for, I think, Oppenheimer, no less, not even Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. So that just shows you how strong the Barbie pre-sales are. So now Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning went from being a threat to Barbie and Oppenheimer to now really under fire from those two. I mean, as Kendall Roy would say, they did a reverse Viking. They pillaged his ship. So that's amazing. That's amazing. And by the way, AMC just revealed today that already 20,000 people are planning a Barbenheimer double feature, which means they will see the film. AMC Stubs members have purchased tickets to both movies for the same day. Do you know how? That's your whole day, because Oppenheimer is 3 hours, Barbie is 2, then you have to add about 30 minutes for trailers and ads before both movies. Then you have to take breaks in between. That's amazing. Are you doing a Barbenheimer double feature? And that's organic, by the way. Now, it's not a studio buying or a group buying up tickets. But it is something that has turned out to be a genuine phenomenon. And I'm sure Hollywood is PR campaigns are already wondering if there's some way they could intentionally duplicate this. I don't know. I don't think you can. And it's funny. It came out of spite from Warner Brothers being upset that Nolan left. That's where it came from. And also Barbie just being such a huge blow up. And again, we'll see what happens. We talked about that in the live stream today. Barbie is being advertised as a blockbuster when I think in reality it's an awards film. And we'll see if that whiplash is cool. Maybe it's both, or, I'm just very curious. This is a fascinating case study. So long story short, if you want to see Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning on a premium screen, you better see it before Thursday, June 20th, when Barbenheimer hits. So you've only got about a week. Then, as for digital movies, Transformers: Rise of the Beast and Asteroid City both come out on Tuesday, again on digital, wherever digital movies are rented or sold. But they'll be at a high price point because they're being rushed to digital. And then with streaming films, Max has Gray Matter on Thursday, and Netflix has Bird Box Barcelona, a spin-off, on Friday. Again, capitalizing on the strength of Latino audiences globally. Then with shows, Apple TV's The After Party actually came back with a second season, and that drops on Wednesday, but just the first 2 episodes. Then on Thursday, Max, I can see why they're gaining market share. They have a lot coming out. They also have Steven Soderbergh's Full Circle. That starts on Thursday with the first 2 episodes. And then they drop the entire season of the new revamped Project Greenlight. Now with Issa Rae, Kumail Nanjiani, and the Woman Kings Gina Prince Bythewood helping out aspiring filmmakers. Again, a lot of Max content. Then also on Thursday, the first 2 episodes of the new season of What We Do in the Shadows over on FX. Then on Friday, Apple TV back again as well. Maybe they can move that number up. They can get off the bottom of the chart. They have season 2 of Foundation, another season 2. And I know a lot of you like Foundation. So that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what do you think of the box office situation this week, both the winners and the losers? Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.